It was reckless behavior that led to the death of a citizen of the city of Tulsa in the state of Oklahoma. I hope this first-degree murder charge, Chief, sends a clear message to drug dealers who sell poison to the men, women, and children of Oklahoma. We in law enforcement are coming after you to hold you accountable for the anguish and suffering that you are inflicting on Oklahomans. Again, I applaud the efforts of the Tulsa Police Department for their heroic efforts, for their thoughtful and effective use of Safe Oklahoma grant money to pursue criminal drug dealers, gangs, and other illicit enterprises. And I appreciate the courageous decision by the Tulsa County DA's office to charge Rogers with first-degree murder. I'm honored my office could play a role in assisting the provision of resources through the Safe Oklahoma grant, making Tulsa and the state of Oklahoma a safer place. At this time, I'd like to introduce First Assistant District Attorney Eric Graylis of the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office. Eric.
My name is Eric Graylis. I'm the First Assistant District Attorney here on behalf of Steve Kunzweiler of the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office. And I'd like to begin my remarks by saying thank you at a state level to the leadership shown by the Attorney General's Office and our Attorney General, Mike Hunter. Thank you for the resources and the support that you've given us at the state level. Also like to say a special thanks to Chief Jordan and all of the officers and detectives of the Tulsa Police Department. Without your dedicated, tireless service, crimes would not be prosecuted and crime would be rampant on our streets. Now, when most people think first-degree murder, they think of a plan, they think of a premeditation done by a defendant for a particular crime. They think of a drawing, they think of a communication beforehand. However, we're here to tell you that that's not the only way a first-degree murder charge could occur. In addition to those types of first-degree murder, there's something called felony murder, and that's what we're here for today. Felony murder occurs when a death, regardless of your intent to commit the death, is caused by the commission of a felony that you committed. In this particular case, if you look at Title 21, Section 701.7b, felony murder is described as any death that occurs during the commission of dealing drugs. In other words, if during the commission of your drug dealing, a death of another person results from that, you could be charged with first-degree murder. That's something that many people don't think about when they're dealing drugs, and it's something many people in the community don't consider first-degree murder. But we're here to tell you that it is. We're here to tell you that we take it seriously, and we're here to tell you that we will be prosecuting it. Quite frankly, this type of charge is not often charged. Too often we've talked with drug dealers and investigated drug dealers, and we look at them only as people who sell drugs. But if your drugs produce the death of another, we're not going to call you a drug dealer anymore. We're going to call you a murderer, because that's what you are and that's what you did. When before, drug dealers who sell drugs to buyers were treated with punishment as drug dealers, we're here to tell you not anymore. If a death results from your drug dealing, you will receive punishment as a murderer. When before, drug dealers who poison our community and people in our community with the things that they peddle, when you were given consideration only as a drug dealer, we're here to tell you not anymore. You will be given consideration as a murderer. Is this being done out of anger, ill will, or spite? Absolutely not. It's being done out of a sense of justice, where the departments of the Attorney General, the Tulsa Police, the District Attorney's Office have come together to identify a threat. And that threat is the illegal distribution of drugs, which are causing far too many deaths in this community. The overdose deaths of heroin, methamphetamine, and other illegal drugs are becoming a rampant and a scourge of our society, where, for far too long, those people have only been treated as drug dealers. We are not doing that anymore. Because of this scourge on our society, we are treating those people to the fullest extent of the law allowed, in this case, first-degree murder. So to all the drug dealers that may be listening, to all of the children and parents who may know a drug dealer or are purchasing from a drug dealer, here is the message that we have for you. No more. Today it stops with the Tulsa Police, the Attorney General, and the District Attorney's Office. You will be treated as a murderer. You will be investigated as a murderer. And if your death causes someone to die, you will spend the rest of your life in prison. Thank you. We'll now entertain any questions you may have.
Does this essentially represent a change in philosophy with the kind of the tools were there, you're using them differently? How does this evolve?
Oftentimes when folks think about murder, they don't think about that. If you do something and not intending to cause a death, that it's not murder. People always think that it must be a premeditated act. The statute is much broader than that. And oftentimes it's difficult to get our heads around the fact that if you really provide something to someone else which kills them, you're a drug dealer. We're here to change that mindset that no, if we can prove that you provided drugs that killed someone, it's a pivot. It's not a change in the statute or the law, but it's a pivot from our offices and the focus that we are going to take from now on. Ultimately, when you're dealing with drug dealer murderers, we're making that pivot, so we're going to hold that to them to the extent of the law.
The Attorney General mentioned that there was maybe some circumstances here that made this case unusual in terms of there was some reference to the circumstances.
Well, this case is Tulsa PD and the Tulsa County District Attorney's Office. But I think the big picture here is the application of the felony murder rule. If you're committing a felony, that is if you're selling dangerous drugs, in this case opioids, and the person who buys the drugs from you dies as a result of that transaction, as a result of those drugs, you can be charged with first-degree murder. And accordingly, District Attorney's Office here has made that decision. I support it wholeheartedly.
But in this case, there's no sort of unusual or peculiar circumstance that made it different?
Eric?
That's an impression I picked up in the moment.
There's nothing unusual in another that we can prove it in this case. There is a certain amount of proof that's required in these cases, and that we have to prove that the drugs that you sold caused the death. So in terms of the investigation, perhaps it's a pivot in terms of investigation. That's where the additional resources from the Attorney General's office have come in real handy. But it's also cases become and produce a homicide case. It's almost as a cross-deputization in a sense. They're investigating it in a different way.
So it's fair to say that this is the first time you're able to make those connections between the homicide and drug dealing, and that's why.
My understanding, and the Attorney General, the Chief, would like to change this. I'll accept it, but I believe this is the first time we've done this in Tulsa County.
We're not in the state, just in Tulsa County.
I wouldn't know, to be perfectly honest.
And then also, can you just talk about what sort of drug dealing and drug addiction does to families, particularly this family, and how they're impacted by it?
Sure. As Attorney General Hunter said, addiction is a psychological disease. It's something that needs to be treated. It's something that needs to be facilitated to get you better, to be a productive member of society. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the deliberate sale from a dealer to a user. The user in this sense, though they are using an illegal substance, is a victim. It is a person that is trapped in that addiction and in that system to where they can't escape. And too often that's what's occurred is an overdose death that is rampant both in the county, the city, the state, and indeed the nation. And so there is a distinction here that we do want to make, that this is not punishing users. This is punishing the people who supply that use.
Do you have any numbers specifically of heroin overdose deaths in Tulsa County?
Not specific numbers, but I know that it is on the increase, both in the state and nationwide.
We're seeing about 1,000 overdose deaths a year in the state on the average over the last 3 years. Most of those are attributable to the overdoses are attributable to opioids. Excuse me.
So can you speak to whether or not this is the first in the state or first in Tulsa County?
So I want to introduce Deputy Attorney General Joy Thorpe, who's here. Joy runs the Tulsa office for the Oklahoma Attorney General, and she is, as I say, Deputy Attorney General for our criminal division. She runs a multi-county grand jury and works with DAs around the state. We had a case where we charged a doctor in Midwest City with 5 counts of second-degree murder. We didn't have the same evidence that would have allowed us to charge her with first-degree murder, but we did bring murder charges against her for reckless conduct.
What was it that was different about this case that allowed you to make that connection?
Through strong work by the detectives and the officers in this case, they were able to make an evidentiary link between the sale of the substance from the dealer, alleged dealer, to the individual that was deceased, Mrs. Searle. So it's about that, making that connection evidentiary for evidence purposes in court in order to allow us to do it.
Pure overdose, or something bad heroin, or just a bad amount of heroin?
That's not something that the medical examiner's office can tell us. They can tell us that there are signs and symptoms of an overdose. They can tell us what's inside the body itself, which in this case is opioids. But in terms of whether it was a good or bad piece of the drugs themselves, I don't believe we know.
What's the status of this suspect?
He is currently, he's a suspect at this point. He's innocent until proven guilty, and he is currently housed at the Tulsa County Jail.
Wasn't he in jail for robbery when you guys, when investigators interviewed him originally?
He was in custody for another alleged offense at the time that detectives were able to connect the dots in this investigation.
And also, the fact that he admitted in an affidavit that he sold this, is that one of the main reasons why you could charge him with murder?
One of the things you have to prove is the link, like we talked about earlier. The link can be established in multiple ways. It could be done through cell phone tracking with towers. It could be done with text messages back and forth. It could be done with confessions. It could be done with witnesses' observations. So there's multiple ways to make that link. And then the facts in this particular case were spelled out in a publicly available affidavit, which you referred to.
Do you know the victim's age?
She was 19 at the time.
Chief, might you speak to what it means to your guys on the street as far as having additional leverage, additional tools, with additional power to put the squeeze on these guys?
Yeah, this is huge for us. You know, we've got to the point where all our officers carry Narcan for opiate overdoses and are used regularly. I think we've got in excess of 30 saves so far. To me, that speaks volumes of what's going on in our streets. I think that as the Attorney General and the District Attorney's Office said, every case is not going to be the perfect case for this, but the work that Andy Dawson has done and what we've seen, he's kind of made a template for us. We're certainly going to pursue others where we have that kind of evidence. We're going to go the same route, and I think it'll help reduce the number of people who are willing to take up that endeavor for a lifestyle.
There, opioids have been so bad, the heroin case, I don't know, is that changing at all the equation of what people are being on now?
You know, we've done a lot of tightening up at the level of the state as far as pharmaceuticals, what doctors can prescribe. You know, for a long time we had a real robbery problem with a lot of the opioids, and a lot of the people who were taking prescription type drugs are not prescribed to them, but prescription drugs are now changing over to heroin, and the same rules are going to apply. Well, again, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
This is a really big deal for us. The collaboration between the three entities has been phenomenal. We couldn't do a lot of the things we're doing right now in this venue if we didn't have the grant from the Attorney General's office to provide overtime for our officers. As you know, our city coffers have not been exactly full in the past decade. You know, we're hurting for police officers, and a lot of times overtime is the only way we can get things done. And they've certainly enabled us to do that in this case and many other cases. So.
How much was that grant for?
400 and, Chief Larson, how much was it exactly? How much was the grant for?
I'm sorry, sir.
How much was the grant for?
Last year was a little over $250,000.
4 million?
Quarter, yeah.
Quarter million. Okay, 260 some thousand, sorry.
All right.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, you're the man. Derek? Let us know what you need, okay?
We will. Joy's been a tremendous help.
Well, I'm lucky to have her. Sounds like Steve's lucky to have her.